What better issue to talk about than quite possibly the least charged cultural and political issue imaginable? All kidding aside, I think abortion is a very interesting topic. It seems that terminology varies depending on what side you're speaking from. Pro-choice and pro-life are two very common descriptors, but there are others that include anti-choice, pro-abortion, and pro-birth. Maybe these misapplied descriptors could be some kind of causal factor for the divisive nature of this issue. For this video, I want to go over the facts on abortion and provide my perspective on the issue. Additionally, I want to look into really good pro-choice arguments that I've heard and break them down and offer rebuttals. While that might cover the abortion debate, there's still policy that needs to be analyzed. I think that most people want to see the number of abortions go down, so it's really important to look at ways in which that can be accomplished. Let's start with the facts on abortion. This includes what an abortion is, to what people think about abortion, to even laws surrounding it and its regulation. From Merriam-Webster, an abortion is the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the embryo or fetus. It's really important also to look into definitions of the words embryo and fetus, which are usually referred to as developing humans after the point of conception. Going into the most recent abortion statistics provided by the CDC, there were about 620,000 abortions performed in 2018. Women aged 20 to 24 have the highest abortion rate out of any age group, but thankfully, all age groups have seen declining abortion rates from 2009 to 2018. Unmarried women have a higher rate of abortion compared to married women at 37.8% to 4.4% respectively. Very interestingly, data from the 43 areas that reported the number of previous live births for women who obtained abortions in 2018 indicate that 40.7%, 24.8%, 19.8%, and 14.7% of these women had 0, 1, 2, or 3 or more previous live births, respectively. Lastly, most abortions, 77.7%, are performed before 9 weeks gestation, and 92.2% are performed before 13 weeks. It's also useful to understand why women get abortions. In 2004, the Guttmacher Institute surveyed women and asked what reasons contribute to them getting an abortion. Here is what some of them said. 74% said that having a baby would dramatically change their life through either interfering with their education or job, or because they have other children. 73% said that they can't afford a baby right now, either because they're unmarried, a student, unemployed, or more. 48% said that they don't want to be a single mother, or that they're having relationship issues. A similar study was done in 2013 and had somewhat similar responses. 40% said that they were not financially prepared, 36% said that it was not the right time for a baby, and 31% said that there were partner-related reasons. Other reasons in these studies have to do with familial influence and health-related issues. Public opinion on this issue is important to the point where it influences policy. And for the most part, people say that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. About half of Americans say that abortion is morally unacceptable, 20% say that it's morally acceptable, and 31% say that abortion is not a moral issue. A bit of a side note, I find it very interesting that half of the country says that abortion is morally wrong, yet more than half think that it should be legal in all or most cases. I wonder where the overlap exists and what degree people think abortion is immoral and what extent it should be legal. Next, I want to look into the current law on abortion. Roe v. Wade is the Supreme Court decision that probably everyone has heard about. It was decided in early 1973 that a woman has a constitutionally protected right to terminate her pregnancy by abortion. The court found that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment protects the right to privacy where abortion is covered. The court also made dividing lines at different stages of development. The state cannot regulate the abortion decision during the first trimester. The state may impose regulations during the second trimester that are reasonably related to maternal health. And finally, during the third trimester, the state can regulate or prohibit abortion on the basis of viability. Other Supreme Court decisions have supplemented this landmark case. Mayer v. Roe held that a state can allocate public funds favoring childbirth over abortion. Planned Parenthood v. Casey held that while a state could require parental consent, waiting periods, and detailed informed consent, it could not require a husband's notification requirement under a new principle of undue burden. Additionally, a new Mississippi abortion law presents a new challenge to the court. Mississippi has a 2018 law that prohibits abortion after 15 weeks, which was quickly blocked by a federal judge. Leaving the federal space, there are plenty of state bills on abortion. My home state of Ohio passed the Human Rights and Heartbeat Protection Act in April of 2019. This bill prohibits abortions when a fetal heartbeat is detected. If a person knowingly and purposefully performs an abortion before determining if there is a fetal heartbeat, they are charged with a 5th-degree felony, which can require 6 to 12 months of imprisonment and a fine of up to $2,500. But a federal judge temporarily blocked the bill, saying that it places an undue burden on a woman's right to choose a pre-viability abortion. And there are recent state actions on abortion as well, both restrictive and permissive. Alabama, Kentucky, and South Dakota have bills to preserve born-alive children after abortion/abortion attempts. Idaho and South Carolina signed bills similar to Ohio's, which have the same impasse of hoping that a federal court upholds that type of bill. Oklahoma and Texas signed trigger bills that would outlaw abortion immediately if Roe was overturned. Colorado and Virginia signed laws pertaining to allowing abortions to be covered by state insurance plans. And New Mexico repealed abortion restrictions, including criminal penalties. With all that information to digest, I wanted to get to the core of this video and present my opinion on abortion. I describe myself as pro-life, and there are 2 reasons why. Unique genetic code at conception and the inability for the fetus to engage in its own development. First, I think the most consistent standard for determining life is conception. Fertilization is the point where unique genetic code, distinct from the mother and father, defines a new human life. I don't think that using different stages of development is a great measure. While you have expectations on when fetal characteristics develop, it isn't consistent across all pregnancies. The same extends to fetal viability. Second, sex is a contract that runs the risk of creating life. When a life is conceived, the couple has a responsibility to bring the life to term. This new life is defenseless and has no capacity for defending itself. It never decided to enter this world, and it has no ability in its current state to participate in this contract, yet it's a notable recipient. It's a one-sided agreement that can be made or broken at any time by the will of the mother, which I think is unfair. I don't know if that comes off across as me demeaning mothers, but if it does, I don't mean it that way. I'm just trying to describe this relationship as best I can. Moving on, sometimes the circumstances of certain abortion cases are brought up. Rape, incest, and maternal health concerns. These cases, similar to an abortion of a full-term pregnancy, are tricky to talk about. No one enjoys talking about rape, incest, or the possible mortality of the mother, and it usually results people giving license to abortion in those cases. To an extent, I think that's fair. But to use rape and incest abortion cases for the main basis of arguing in favor of abortion is wrong, as according to the previously cited Guttmacher Institute, less than 2% of women get abortion because of those reasons. I understand the argument from people on the pro-life side of the spectrum who say that a child doesn't deserve harm onto it because of the harm done to the mother. Honestly, cases of rape and incest are ones that I don't want to talk about, and I feel that it detracts from the main issue. Cases of maternal health are more interesting. As mentioned earlier, one reason for getting an abortion is health concerns. Pro-life people distinguish abortion from the unintentional loss of a life in the case of saving the mother's life, a matter of intentionality and action. They say that abortion is not medically necessary to save the life of the mother. If that's the case, then that's a really good thing. I'm aware that 22 weeks has been the earliest a child can survive outside of the womb, so carrying that into possible health risks with the mother after that period would be a good thing. I understand that women get abortions because of the dire circumstances that they're in, and that's something I very much sympathize with. If my goal is to reduce abortions, then it would require me addressing some of the reasons that women get abortions, which is fine with me. Standard of living and cost are big factors for women getting abortions. Relationship status is another factor, especially when unmarried women are more likely to get abortions than married women. I wanted to move away from my hopefully comprehensive opinion on this issue to turn to opinions that I disagree with. These disagreements may be philosophical or practical, but they still warrant looking into. The first perspective that I found surrounds women's post-abortion mental health. There is a lingering question if women have worse mental health after getting an abortion. It seems from a variety of sources that this is not the case, and actually, it's the restrictions of abortion that contribute to deteriorating mental health in women. One such source is the Turnaway Study, a longitudinal study looking into the mental health of women with unwanted pregnancies. The terminology and the type of pregnancy is very important. Looking at 30 abortion facilities from 2008 to 2010, the study interviewed participants over a period of 5 years, asking questions on mental illness, including questions on if abortion was the right decision for them. It found that 95% of women reported that the abortion was the right decision for them over the 5 years after getting it. But this study has flaws in its participation rates. About 3,000 women were invited to participate in the study, but only 1,100 did, an initial participation rate of 36%. Additionally, the drop-off between interviews were noticeable too. This means that there could have been a sizable number of women who did regret aborting their unwanted pregnancies, possibly providing new meaning to these findings. The participation rate is an issue in other studies as well, but it's hardly ever pointed out. Something I realized looking through this was the difference between wanted and unwanted pregnancies. It makes sense to me that we should be treating these types of pregnancies differently. And it makes sense that women having to abort wanted pregnancies would experience worse mental health outcomes than women having to abort unwanted pregnancies. In the stats I talked about earlier going into reasons why women get abortions, you could probably guess what type of pregnancies women had from the reasons they gave. But it might just be better to ask the question again, which I really hope happens. Another popular defense of abortion comes from Judith Jarvis Thompson in a 1971 essay titled A Defense of Abortion. This essay explores 3 thought experiments, arguing that a fetus's right to life does not triumph a woman's right to bodily autonomy. The first is a thought experiment called The Violinist, the second, The Expanding Child, and the third, People's Seeds. The second highlights third-party participation, while the third references pregnancy from voluntary intercourse. I'll look through all 3 of these briefly. Here is the violinist scenario. Simply put, you are kidnapped and have your circulatory system plugged into a violinist to save his life. Thompson argues that unplugging yourself from this violinist does not violate his right to life, but instead deprives him of the right to use your body to help him recover. This is only true so far as you are coerced into the situation outside of your own choices. You had no say in putting the violinist in this situation that he's in, and you have a right to leave. The same is not true in the case of a mother and the fetus, where the former ran a risk of creating the latter, and now has the burden to bear of carrying the pregnancy. The second experiment is the expanding child. Thompson says that a woman's right to abortion rests on a doctor's willingness to perform it. And if that willingness is not present, then the woman loses that right. So does the capacity for the woman to act inside of her own house, her own body, become lost entirely? A mother certainly has the capacity to do with her body what she wants, but she cannot compel third parties to be the arbiters of decisions of her body, as you can't be compelled to donate your bodily autonomy to a violinist who requires it for his life. The doctor's autonomy and choice to not perform the abortion is as valuable a right as the mother's autonomy over her body. Lastly is the experiment of the people seeds. Thompson compares people seeds flying through windows to contraception, steps people take to reduce the risk of having a child. But that's all that is, reducing risk. Thankfully, because of better technology, the risk of becoming pregnant is reduced significantly and quite possibly could be 0. But the risk is still there, and the responsibility has to be placed on you if the risk doesn't fall in your favor. Vaush is a self-described libertarian socialist and a very popular political streamer. He's someone I watch from time to time, as it's really important to diversify your political intake. He recently made a video going into why he's pro-choice. He says that the issue of abortion is not whether or not the fetus is alive, which he concedes it is at conception, but if the fetus's right to life supersedes a woman's right to bodily autonomy. He goes into the messy definition of personhood and the right to life, talking about different legal implications, placing this definition at different stages, premised on the idea that abortion is murder. He offers a very interesting thought experiment on the most fundamental right individuals have, bodily autonomy.
And here, I'll give you the ultimate example. The greatest right we have, the greatest right as individuals we have, is bodily autonomy. It's one of our greatest rights. You have to commit a crime, the state, or be committed for the state to take it from you. You may not choose to get pregnant, but you choose to not use a condom. Well, let's say you get in a car accident because you fucked up. You ran a red light, and when you wake up, you're on an IV drip to the other driver. Now, in this case, it is your fault that both of you are in this position. But nonetheless, our state recognizes the inviolate right to bodily autonomy. Now, mind you, if you fuck up traffic-wise and you end up getting another person killed because you ran a red light, you can be sued for this. You can be tried for this. You can be punished in a great many ways legally for it in both criminal and civil court. But you cannot be forced to commit your bodily resources to the livelihood of the other person, even if you're the only person on earth who is capable of saving them, you can say no. That is your right.
This example likens the reckless driver who got into an accident to the woman who had sex and conceived a child, with both understanding the risks of their actions going in. Vosh is saying that despite the risks, we have a framework in place that recognizes you can't have your body wired up to save or develop the other person that you had a part in putting them in. But in these clips, Vosh recognizes that damages are a real thing that can be paid in the situation in the reckless driver. While the reckless driver is not compelled to donate their body, they are compelled by state authority to pay monetary damages and go to jail. Two immediate questions come to mind. If there is no framework for paying damages or going to jail in the case of the car accident, then what is owed to the driver that you just crashed into? And more importantly, what damages are owed to the child that you conceived? Destiny is another left-wing political streamer that I watch, best described as a progressive or a social democrat. He had a debate about a month ago with a libertarian TikToker on abortion. Destiny's position when it comes to abortion surrounds the idea of consciousness and how humans value it. Destiny also goes into the potentiality of life and explains why it's not inherently valuable.
Why don't you think that we should value potentiality?
I don't understand how any type of moral system could value something that doesn't currently exist. The idea of valuing or taking into consideration the preferences of a thing that has no preferences or can assert any preferences just seems like it opens up a whole can of worms to me. So it seems as though it's far easier and more reasonable to just say that once you have a conscience and once you can assert preferences, it's easier there to be respectful or mindful of those preferences, and then any type of ethical or government system ought to respect and protect those preferences. But you can't protect something that doesn't exist yet, or there's not a harm being committed there if something doesn't exist yet.
Him and the TikToker go back and forth numerous times on potentiality, but that isn't what's important. Destiny's personal stance on the viability of life seems to hinge on a conscious experience. In this TikTok debate, he doesn't seem to provide a definition or instance of it and when it begins. Following the conclusion of another debate, he provides his input on this.
How do you define conscious experience? I mostly agree with you, but I'm stuck on what levels of intelligence/awareness I would consider consciousness.
Yeah, this is really easy. To prove a conscious experience, really, all you have to do is figure that out, and then you will be an award-winning publisher in fucking neuroscience, neurobiology, philosophy, psychology. Good luck figuring that one out. There's a few things that we can say definitively. One, hopefully, is that we have a conscious experience. Two is that conscious experience almost certainly is an emergent property of our brains, and then therefore, hopefully, we can say number three, other people have brains like us, so other people must project conscious experiences like us.
It is very much a non-answer, which is fair given that it might be impossible to tell when conscious experiences start or whether they exist in the first place. Before I conclude, I want to look into practical means of reducing abortion, which should be some kind of goal for most people. Most people on the right agree that a key responsibility of the government is to protect life. While it might not be able to predict and prevent all murder cases, it does have institutional power to punish those who violate other people's right to life. This begs the question, should government power be extended to restrict and punish abortion? And to what extent is it possible for the government to effectively do that? It seems intuitive that restrictions on something would reduce its prevalence to at least some degree, but that might not be the case, as blanket restrictions on abortions have not been attributable to declines in the abortion rate. But there are other ways that governments can reduce abortion, such as shifting legal statuses of abortion and redirecting funding to health centers that don't provide abortion. There are a few proactive and reactive alternatives to abortion that can be explored: abstinence, contraception, adoption, and motherhood. Abstinence is the most surefire way to not get pregnant. Unfortunately, it's not the case that it's widely practiced where it should be. Abstinence-only education has been touted as good in theory, but it can be impractical for different reasons. There should be more realistic options on the table, as you can't convince most people to be abstinent overnight. Contraceptives are a really good proactive alternative. While they do not reduce the risk 100%, it's reduced to a significant degree. A pack of condoms are pretty cheap, but birth control isn't. Something that should be done would be to look into birth control prices and see how they can be made cheaper. One argument that I heard from the left is that providing free contraception would reduce the burden of government poverty programs, which is something to consider. Another argument I heard along those same lines would be to require an IUD on women who are on poverty programs and keep getting pregnant and having children. Adoption is the first reactive alternative I want to talk about. Maybe instead of terminating the unborn life, you can give them up for adoption. Yearly, there are about 100,000 children eligible for adoption, but anywhere from 400,000 to 600,000 children in the foster care system. Additionally, it's estimated that there are between 1 to 2 million couples looking to adopt children. These kids are really desperate for a home, and it seems that there are plenty of people looking to bring them into it. Making this process easier would be a greater thing. I understand that abuse is a real thing when it comes to adoption, so investigating this further to combat it is desirable. The last reactive alternative would be to encourage motherhood. This is the most wide-reaching alternative in terms of action, referencing why women get abortions, cost issues, relationship issues, and more have to be tackled to incentivize women to take the motherly track. And of course, fathers need to be invested as well. But that's about it. To those who made it through the entire video, thank you very much. It is very much appreciated. This is a very engaging video to research, and it was really nice to get all my thoughts down on one place. There are certainly some places where I should have explored, but I feel like the video would have become much longer than it already is. I really enjoy this type of video, and I hope to do more of these in the future, not just on big issues like abortion, but on smaller issues as well. With that said, one thing that I want out of these videos is feedback. I like hearing from people on things like this, and I always really appreciate resources and criticism. Thank you again for watching. I hope to make more videos soon.